Hi everyone. We are going to have a great chat today with Marea Goodman. She's author of an amazing book called Baby Making for Everybody. And she is the founder of Pregnant Together. She's going to hop on here in a second. Let me see if I can get her on. But good morning. If you guys want, I love seeing where everybody's sitting today, where are you joining us from. So if you can, put in the chat your city, and love to see where everybody's watching from. It's so much fun. All right, let's get Marea on. Just a second. Dallas, hello, Toronto, Costa Rica, amazing. Okay, here's Marea. Hi, Philadelphia. Okay, so you guys, I'm really excited because Marea and I have gotten to know each other, I guess, a couple of years now, just through, line of work. And she has been really supportive of what we've been building here. We really love what she's been building as well at Pregnant Together. She has Restore Midwifery, is where she has her midwifery practice. But she is a licensed and certified professional midwife based in Santa Cruz, California. She got her license in 2015. She's provided midwifery care to people birthing at home as well as in birth centers. In 2016, Marea founded Restore Midwifery and has focused on providing queer and trans competent prenatal and birth care, as well as fertility and IUI services. So some of you may be aware, some of you may not, that a properly trained midwife can do IUI services at home, but they must be trained. And there are things to take precautions about. And so Marea might have the ability to speak to that a little bit today. But as mentioned, she's also an author. Her work has been published in Everyday Feminism, Miss Magazine, Motherly, and I'm reading because I don't have all this memorized, Huffington Post. And as I mentioned, she has this fantastic book, which we are a big fan of, called Baby Making for Everybody. It's incredible. And she really goes through not only like the physical elements of creating a baby and a family, but also societal and emotional elements as well, which we all know is part of the family building process, especially here in America. There's a lot of things to consider when building a family, and she takes all of that into account. So it's a really great book. We recommend it. But really today, I want to let Marea give her own intro as well. So correct me if I said anything out of place, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing with Pregnant Together, and then we can dive into some conversation here.
Sounds great. Yes. I'll just say I'm fighting a little something off, so I don't always sound like this, but
it's fall, y'all. I don't know if you guys, it's probably hard to tell, but I got nasal stuff going on. I might sneeze in the middle of this. I got a cold too.
Yeah, we're doing our best. So I'm a midwife, based in California. Yeah, your introduction was great. Currently really focusing a lot of my work on just like building support and resilience for folks who are growing their families, especially in non-traditional ways. So queer folks, solo folks, people that are in heterosexual relationships but need a little extra support for conceiving. And we've talked, Maureen, about like the kind of biases against folks who need a little more fertility support in our society. And I think we're aligned in our passion for supporting people and normalizing all different forms of family building. And so that's really important to me. I'm super passionate about it. I created Pregnant Together, which is an online community that supports queer folks and allies through trying to conceive and pregnancy. And one thing that I see with my clients that I experienced myself when I was trying to conceive and during my pregnancy is that there's a lot of isolation in this process. I think many of us are isolated to begin with in our society, but then especially if we're going through any challenges in growing our families, whether it's because of our relationship status or we're on some spectrum of the infertility spectrum, it's hard, and many people feel really alone in the process. So I'm really trying to build support for folks going through this.
Yes, so we absolutely appreciate that. So for everybody joining on, I know we had a whole bunch of people just come on. Marea Goodman is a licensed and certified midwife. She has a community that she's created called Pregnant Together. It's a very inclusive community, no matter where you are in your journey, or whatever your life situation may be. They are very supportive and there to help be, as she mentioned, a little less isolating. But let's talk a little bit about midwifery. Let's talk about how can somebody, I thought this was just for babies, like when you're pregnant or when for birthing. So tell us a little bit about fertility services that you've been able to provide, and then how that can kind of align with home insemination and what you can do for people who are trying to conceive.
Totally. Well, so like the two sort of values of midwifery, as far as I understand them, one is informed consent. So that means that I see my job as providing my clients with all of the information that they need and deserve to receive the best healthcare, optimize their choices, grow their families in the ways that they want to. So that's a huge part of midwifery fertility care, is supporting folks to figure out how to time their ovulation, time their inseminations, whether they're at home with Mosie Baby or doing IUI or having heterosexual intercourse. A lot of people think that just by tracking their menstrual cycle on an app that they're going to know when to inseminate. And I think that's one of the biggest myths in the fertility world. And so that's a big part of my job as a midwife when I do fertility care, is supporting people to understand their bodies in a deeper way, and also with a trauma-informed perspective, because so many people, especially those of us assigned female at birth, experience some form of trauma around our bodies. And so I really see this process as like there's a lot of potential for healing as long as we get the support that we can have. So informed consent, and then also like a real orientation around like supporting the body's normal functions. So as a midwife, my scope of practice is low risk pregnancy and birth, and I take that same approach into my fertility care. So as I said, the fertility and infertility journey is a spectrum. There are folks that will be best served in a fertility clinic with higher tech tools to help regulate their cycles. Depending on what's going on, I can help folks figure out if they would be best served by a midwife with a less interventive approach, or a fertility clinic with a more interventive approach. And one thing I love about Mosie Baby is that it really offers an option that is lower tech, and often that's all that folks need. Folks need some support in figuring out their timing. Maybe sperm parameters are slightly below normal and just need a little extra help getting to where they need to be. And especially for people that have experienced any medical trauma, or just really want to have the experience of getting pregnant without this high tech intervention, midwifery fertility care is a really great choice.
That's awesome. So for everybody joining, if you do have questions for Marea or for me, go ahead. You can start leaving those in the chat. We're going to get to those later, and we'll try to address them and kind of get to those in a few minutes. I'd love to understand at what point should someone consider seeing a midwife when trying to conceive? Like at what point would somebody be like, okay, now is a good time for me to reach out to a midwife who specializes in fertility? Because not every midwife does. So that's a unique thing in its own regard.
Yes, definitely. There are a few different answers. Like, one is when you're thinking about growing your family, if you can reach out to a midwife, we can help you support lifestyle choices, supplements, figure out that timing. Even before starting to try, it can feel really nice to have a trained professional in your corner that's like, hey, these are some things to think about. I got you. We can check in and have that sort of support. the kind of like traditional Western medical diagnosis of infertility is if you've been trying to conceive for over a year, if you're under 35, without getting pregnant, or if you're over 35, you've been trying to conceive for 6 months without getting pregnant. So many of my clients who are in queer relationships or not in relationships don't technically meet that requirement because their quote unquote infertility issue is not having easy access to sperm.
Day one is different for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, it depends on your relationship status, on your situation. But that definition is useful for us because that's what insurance companies use and fertility clinics use as far as the quote unquote definition of infertility. I would say, like, if you've been trying for a certain amount of time or you need that support, whether it's from choosing a donor to figuring out your insemination timing, and you want to stay as low intervention as possible, like, then that would be a good time to reach out to a midwife and get some support.
Yeah. So for people who are considering low intervention methods, it sounds like a good first step for them. Obviously, if you're struggling to conceive and it's been past 12 months or 6 months over the age of 35, you definitely want to also check in with a medical provider. There are some simple tests your OB-GYN can do, your family provider, your PCP can do potentially.
And many midwives can actually do those same tests.
Awesome. Okay.
So
I wasn't fully aware of that even.
Yep,
that they can do a lot of the same tests.
We do a lot of the same tests. We draw labs.
Okay.
We can do that sort of thing. Most of us don't have the tools to do like an HSG, which is when they put saline into the uterus. Like, there's some higher tech tests and screenings that we can't do, but many of the lab tests and general assessments we can.
Awesome. Well, I saw some questions come in, so I want to address those real quickly, and then we can kind of go back to some of our other questions that we had lined up ahead of time. But one person asked about a directory of midwives who do home insemination. Does that exist anywhere?
Such a great question. You're not the first person to ask me. Not that I know of yet, but it's on my radar. And my co-author, Ray Racklin, who's a midwife in Philadelphia, is actually starting a course to train out of fertility clinic IUI providers. So my sense is that there are going to be more and more people offering this service. Okay. For now, I would say do a Google search in your area, home IUI. If you don't find that, reach out to midwives in your area and ask them if they know someone who is doing this.
Okay, so we just identified a gap that we need to correct.
Yes.
So risks associated with home insemination. So there's two things that we should probably address. One, home insemination is different than IUI.
Yeah.
So IUI must be done by a medical provider. And you can, why don't you share a little bit more about IUI, and then we can talk about home insemination and the risk associated with that.
Sure, yeah. So IUI is short for intrauterine insemination. And so it's when we put a washed semen sample. So we just take the sperm from the seminal fluid. Seminal fluid has lots of other things besides sperm that help protect the sperm and keep it alive. But when we do an intrauterine insemination, we have to separate all that other stuff out. So we just have the sperm. It's a small sample of sperm, even though it's 10 million or something like that, depending on the sample. And then we use a sterile catheter to go through the cervix and into the uterus and put the sperm directly into the uterus. And so I like to say the sperm is kind of like hitching a ride to the fallopian tubes where it needs to go, and it gets to save its energy for finding the egg, and it does increase your chances of conception. So statistically, without IUI, each attempt is about 10 to 12% effective, and depending on age and other fertility factors, an IUI has about an 18% efficacy rate.
Some of that, though, I believe is also associated with the use of medications. Like a lot of people do medicated IUI. Is that
Yeah.
something that you work with people on, or are you doing natural IUI?
Yeah,
Or
so
unmedicated
that's
IUI, I should say.
yeah, so I do unmedicated IUI, but sometimes I do co-care with fertility clinics.
Mm-hmm.
And so a fertility doctor can prescribe the medication that can support ovulation and
Mm-hmm.
kind of take some of the guesswork out of the timing and then still do the IUI at home. There are a lot of fertility clinics that I work with, and it depends, you know, you can pick and choose the services that you want from a
Mm-hmm.
fertility clinic. And the data around IUI is it's hard to find really reliable data because it is based on heterosexual couples that have experienced infertility and not based on
Yeah.
people who maybe don't have access to sperm in their life and their relationship. So kind of tricky to talk about the statistics.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then
There's a
Mo,
few
if you
studies
want
out there that have been done with donor sperm,
to,
but there's also a lot of like particular situations with some of those studies. So yeah, we've looked at a lot of those studies ourselves.
yeah.
And so that's something to be aware of too. You know, I think that for a lot of people, IUI is a good option, and you know, home insemination, while is a good option for a large number of people, right? Like there's a whole population of people who are overlooked in the design of these protocols for IUI,
Mm-hmm.
and they simply need an alternative, right? They need
Totally.
an alternative to intercourse, or they need to take a break from intercourse. They are ovulating because that's obviously something that's really critical. You need to do it during the ovulatory phase of your cycle. But ultimately, you know, sometimes you just need that method, and that's a baseline. And that's where I think home insemination comes in. And so the question was, you know, are the risks associated with home insemination the same as with intercourse? And I think that
Do
just
you mean IUI?
not IUI with home
Okay.
insemination. So like Mosie, the Mosie Baby kit for home insemination is a form of intravaginal insemination.
Right.
In many ways, it is similar to intercourse, right? Intercourse, the semen is deposited into the vaginal canal. Obviously, it was a method designed by Mother Nature, and we work really hard to provide a syringe that is designed to be like the penile opening with a slit opening and provide a longer, wider spray and a design for a gentler transfer. So that's where Mosie's unique design comes in with our syringe, and our patented tip is a part of that. We're the only ones, by the way, who have that patented tip. So it's really unique to what we've done here. We've got a lot of other features as well, which help guide you in the process. And the depth of the syringe and how deep it's inserted according to the length is important as well. But yeah, so what we've done is to create a kit that simplifies that process. And in past surveys, we found that people have found it, 97% have said it's comfortable and easy to use. And the risk associated with this are typically on par with intercourse, right? Like if it's not safe for you to have sex and it's not safe for you to get pregnant, you shouldn't be doing home insemination. You shouldn't be doing insemination in any form. And depending on if you're using donor sperm or a known donor or a partner, a sexual partner of yours, there are other considerations that you'll need to keep in mind prior to doing insemination. So as an example, if you're working with a known donor, you might want to do an STD test. You might want to also test for sperm viability. And then, you know, if you're working with a sperm bank, they should be testing all of that prior.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll want to confirm that with the sperm bank. And otherwise, it's really a matter of whether or not it is safe for you to become pregnant, safe for you to have intercourse, and you are ovulating. So those are typically the key pieces that you want to think about. And then around that as well, dependent on your sperm source. Anything you want to add to that though?
No, I think that's really thorough. I think Mosie Baby is like such a great option, especially when you have fresh semen, right? you're using to get pregnant, no matter, you know, if it's your partner or your donor or somebody else. I know people also use it with success with unwashed um, donor sperm from sperm banks as well.
Do you want to share what that means? So for people
Yeah.
who might be considering using sperm from a sperm bank,
Yes.
there are two
So,
ways to work. Mm-hmm.
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no.
Yes, so if you're going with a sperm bank, they process sperm for insemination in two different ways. So as I said before, so they can either wash it, which is when they separate all the other things that are in seminal fluid from the sperm. That's called an IUI ready vial. As a midwife, I recommend if you have an IUI ready vial to do an IUI, because when they remove all that seminal fluid, they take out a lot of the protective things that protect the sperm from the acidity of the vaginal canal, and it's really meant to go directly into the uterus.
Yeah, so the semen that it is delivered in, right? Like the sperm is delivered in the semen, is actually really designed to help them transfer. It's a viscous fluid that changes in viscosity over time. It's actually, quite frankly, an incredible thing. When you get into human reproduction and our bodies and what they do in this process, it needs to be studied more, because it's really incredible that you can have a human bodily fluid change like that. But it's designed to protect, as you said, against the vaginal environment and to transport it through the cervix.
Exactly. And it has special, like it has sperm food and another, I mean, I'm getting off topic, but another bodily
I love talking
function
about this, so don't worry.
that's so cool that changes throughout the cycle is the cervical fluid. So during ovulation, the actual molecular makeup of the cervical fluid changes. So usually it's like, if you look at it under a microscope, it's like crosshairs. And during ovulation, it's lines, and it kind of creates this like super highway for the sperm, and it works with the seminal fluid to get the sperm into uterus. So back to what we were
No, I love
about.
geeking out on this stuff, so go for it.
It's very cool how our bodies work. You can buy ICI vials of sperm from the fertility clinic, which is unwashed. So it's been frozen, but it hasn't been processed. Once you defrost it, you can use that, you know, with something like Mosie Baby for a lower intervention fertility process.
Yes. So for everybody joining in, we have Marea Goodman here. She's a licensed certified midwife. She wrote an amazing book, which we mentioned earlier, called Baby Making for Everybody. And she is taking questions. If you guys have questions about fertility, ovulation, IUI, at-home insemination, the Mosie Baby kit, we welcome any of those questions. But I would love, in the meantime, for you to share when you see home insemination with Mosie as a good fit for some of your clients, and how you decide who can use Mosie Baby or a home insemination kit.
Yeah, so I would say for my heterosexual clients who have been trying for some amount of time, and we went over the medical definition for infertility, but I also, there's a lot of emotions in this process, and sometimes for folks who've been trying for 3 months and haven't yet gotten pregnant, even though it's totally within the realm of normal, they may want to try something that will increase their chances of conception a little bit, will like maybe help take some of the pressure off of things. So you don't have to like meet a certain like official criteria to try Mosie Baby. Like I think it's a great option for folks that that just want a little something else, a little extra support. So I think, yeah, for heterosexual people who've been trying that want that, that's awesome. For my queer and solo parent clients that have known donors that are doing insemination anyway, we talk about the process for getting that sample, and you want to do the insemination within about 30 to 45 minutes of ejaculation. But Mosie Baby is an awesome option when you're using known donor sperm. And then an option as well, I have a lot of folks that have a known donor, but then if their donor doesn't live close by, they do what's called a directed donor program, where the donor donates at a sperm bank, and then they can ship the sperm bank ships the sperm to their house. So if that hasn't been processed for IUI, and that's ICI ready vials, Mosie Baby is a great option for that as well.
Yeah. So can you tell a little bit more about the direct to donor programs through? So not, I don't know if every sperm bank is willing to do that, but walk us through that process. And usually I believe there's a timeline associated with that as well. Because do they quarantine? Is that what happens?
So most sperm banks, if you're not a sexual partner with your donor, which is kind of tricky and complicated, and I think there's some, sperm banks aren't necessarily set up for queer and solo parent families.
And some of that is not necessarily on the sperm bank's fault. Some of that is just historical systemic things with the way regulations are as well.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. But so basically you can set up an account at a sperm bank that's close to where your donor lives. And then they can deposit it depending on their sperm count and motility. The sperm bank they can test the sperm and then advise how many deposits to do, and then the sperm bank will process that, freeze it. Usually there's a 6-month quarantine, depending on, I know there's a sperm bank in California, the Sperm Bank of California, that has a program where if the donor gets tested, donates within that week, and then gets tested again, then you can, and all those tests are clear, you can waive that 6-month quarantine. So different sperm banks have different ways of doing that, and I recommend talking to the individual one that you're thinking of working with. But it's a great way to take some of the logistical stress out of the insemination process, because it can be hard if you have a donor that lives far away. There are some ways to ship sperm across the country, but it's challenging and logistically overwhelming.
Yeah.
Often, so
I mean, oftentimes people, I know from hearing from the Mosie community, they sometimes prefer to actually just travel to each other and time it for that fertile period.
People do that too. I always talk about all those different options and always the cost of, and then we're not robots, so like sometimes if we ovulate a little early or a little bit late, it can just be tricky. So
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. Tell us some tips for timing ovulation.
Yeah, so with my clients, we talk about 4 main methods of tracking ovulation. So checking cervical fluid, we talked about how the consistency changes during ovulation. I love supporting my clients to look at their cervix. So use a speculum to actually see how the cervix actually opens visibly during the ovulation window. It's super cool. And when
I'm a huge fan of telling people, and hopefully Instagram doesn't kick us off here, of like sticking their finger in their vagina and finding their own cervix.
Totally.
And it sounds really crude to say it, but honestly, your vagina is part of your body. It's a body part, and it's your body. And we let other things in there and other people in there, and we have to really understand, like, you have no problem like reaching in the back of your mouth to pick something out of your tooth. Like, you should be completely comfortable doing this. But at first, it's sometimes a little nerve-wracking for people because they've been told, like, no, don't touch that. Don't touch that. It's been ingrained in you since you were a little child. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because the cervix is the most incredible body part, you guys. It is so incredible. Cool. So tell us more about it and how it changes.
Sure.
And how you can find it yourself.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to talk about it. I will also say, in my book, Baby Making for Everybody, I spent like so many hours going through the process of talking through how to feel your cervix and also how to use a speculum at home. So it's actually not hard to get a speculum. They're like $15 or $20 online. And there's a whole process that you can use to actually see your cervix, which is really cool. And I will also say there's a website called mybeautifulcervix.com that has tons of photos that people have submitted of their cervixes at different points of the cycle. So it's really amazing. So if you imagine, actually our uterus is the size of our fist, and the cervix is about the length of our thumb. And if you imagine, like, throughout the cycle, so during menstruation, the uterus moves and the cervix is in line with the vagina. Then after menstruation, it moves back towards our sacrum. Then during ovulation, it moves forward and it actually softens and it goes a little bit higher in our bodies and opens. So you can visibly see the cervix open. And if you follow me on Instagram, I post pictures of open ovulating cervixes often. So you can check that out too. And after ovulation, it hardens again and then moves back and then comes back forward if we're not pregnant for menstruation again. If we are pregnant, it stays back. And the cervix also throughout pregnancy does very interesting things. And then towards the end starts actually like melting away to allow for the cervix to open when we're giving birth. So it's so cool. I think our bodies are amazing. And the cervix, is like, I think the coolest organ in our bodies and gives us really valuable information for when to time inseminations. So for the fertility tracking, the openness of the cervix, the cervical fluid, basal body temperature. So our internal body temperature actually rises after we ovulate. So that can be a really useful way to figure out what our fertility patterns are. And then using all three of those methods in combination with an ovulation predictor kit, which Mosie Baby sells. And that ovulation predictor kits measure the amount of luteinizing hormone in our urine. And luteinizing hormone is the hormone that triggers our ovaries to release an egg. And so it will let us know when we're nearing ovulation, which is when we should start planning for our insemination.
Yep. So much to learn. And I think that we're all learning as a generation. As we have now women who can lead companies and address issues, I think it's been really incredible to watch a lot of the other femtech companies like Mosie Baby put out educational material, because we all have been told not to touch our body, particularly our vagina, our cervix, our vulva, and then we've all been told nothing about it except for you have your period when you bleed and don't have sex because you'll get pregnant immediately. So if you guys have any other questions, let us know. Marea is going to be working a little bit closer with Mosie Baby in the near future, and we'll share more about that when the time is right. And she is available, though, to respond to some questions if you have any that come up afterwards. Thank you, everyone, for hopping on here today. It was great to see everybody, see people from Costa Rica, Philadelphia, from Texas. And, let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to DM us and we'll be in touch. And we're wishing you all the best, no matter where you are in your journey. If you are just figuring things out, if you are moving on to the next step, we're here for you and we're rooting for you. So please do reach out if we can support you anyway. And thank you, Marea, for all your insight and knowledge. It's such a pleasure to chat with you, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, working at it.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Nice to chat.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.